Once, in a small village, lived a witch named Catherine and her sister Laura. They lived a short distance away from the village. Catherine was ugly and very cruel. She caused trouble for everyone. Using magic, she stole animals and birds for food. She also took money and jewels from the villagers. The people hated her. Everyone stayed far away from those sisters. One night, Catherine and Laura were in the kitchen preparing dinner.
I want chicken,
Laura said, looking at the pot. Catherine smiled and muttered a spell. With a wave of her hand, the air around them shimmered. Outside, the birds in Mr. Robert's cage fluttered in fear. Suddenly, one hen disappeared from the cage with a flash. In an instant, the hen appeared in their kitchen. Catherine smiled.
Now, cut it. Quick. I'm hungry.
Laura grabbed the terrified hen and started her work. Later, as they were eating, Laura took a leg piece and said,
I was really craving this today. Thanks, sister.
Catherine smiled and walked to her bedroom. The next morning, Mrs. Robert went outside with the grain pouch. She opened the cage and noticed Cutie was missing. She whispered,
Oh no! Where's my cutie?
She shouted,
My God! My cutie!
Mr. Robert and both sons rushed out.
She is so cruel. By now, those sisters must have eaten my cutie.
Mr. Robert patted her shoulder.
Ava, please don't cry.
He gently took her inside. Albert ran to fetch water for her. Soon, the news spread across the village. Everyone was sad but helpless. One day, Catherine was returning from the city with the shopping bags when she saw a handsome young man walking toward her.
I'm Dr. Daniel. Can you guide me to the village?
He asked. She smiled.
Walk with me.
Catherine liked him instantly. When they reached the village, Daniel went to the dispensary while Catherine returned home. Laura opened the door and grabbed the bags. Catherine sat in the lounge, smiling.
What happened?
Laura asked.
A young doctor came to the village.
Catherine replied.
I'm going to marry him.
Laura was surprised.
Will he agree?
Catherine said.
He must agree.
Dr. Daniel opened the door and looked around. He went to the store and bought bread and milk. Mr. Robert asked,
Who are you?
Dr. Daniel smiled.
I'm Dr. Daniel.
Nice to meet you.
Mr. Robert said.
I send dinner for you.
Daniel thanked him and returned. Later, Archie and Albert brought him a tray of food. Daniel ate and thanked them. The boys took the tray back. The next day, Daniel cleaned the dispensary, set up his room, and started the kitchen. Dr. Daniel started working, and patients began coming. One day, Catherine visited the dispensary. Dr. Daniel smiled.
Oh. You.
Catherine replied,
Yes. I came to invite you for dinner tonight.
Dr. Daniel said.
I will come.
Catherine smiled and left. After the groceries, she returned home.
Please prepare a special dinner.
Catherine said to Laura.
I invited Daniel here.
Laura smiled.
Oh. I will.
Laura made dinner while Catherine checked everything. She eagerly waiting for him. Soon, Daniel arrived. Soon, Laura set the table and invited them to sit. Catherine served the food, and Daniel enjoyed it. After dinner, Daniel said,
I should go now.
Catherine smiled and looked into his eyes.
I really liked you coming.
Daniel felt something odd, but didn't pay attention and left. The next day, at store after buying, Mr. Robert asked,
Did you make any friends?
Daniel replied,
Yes. Catherine invited me for dinner. She is nice.
Mr. Robert's eyes widened.
She is a witch.
Daniel was shocked. After some days, Catherine came.
I want to marry you,
she said. Daniel shocked.
But I don't.
Catherine smiled.
I will marry you. That's it.
Then, she left. That night, Daniel packed his things and tried to leave. At the village boundary, he stumbled twice. Catherine's voice stopped him.
You can't go. You must marry me.
Terrified, he looked back. She was smiling. He pleaded, but she said,
Tomorrow, our marriage is fixed.
The next night, at the church, Catherine was in a bridal dress. Guests looked sad but helpless. The priest sighed and performed the marriage. Daniel's face was pale. Daniel moved into Catherine's house. A year later, Catherine gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. When Diana was 2 weeks old, Daniel overheard Catherine talking.
I can't magic on him due to weakness,
Catherine said.
I'm afraid Daniel will escape.
Laura reassured her.
He doesn't know about this.
Daniel smiled. That night he kissed his baby and left a note.
Catherine, I'm going.
The next morning, Catherine found the letter.
He left me,
Catherine screamed. Laura came running to her. Catherine was heartbroken. When Diana was 5 years, Catherine enrolled her in school. On the first day, Diana met Sarah and Lily. They became friends. After school, Sarah told her mom about Diana. Mrs. Robert frowned.
Stay away from her.
Meanwhile, Lily's mom, Mrs. Elizabeth, praised Diana's father. The next day, Sarah said coldly,
You can't be my friend.
Diana was shocked. Lily scolded Sarah. That evening, Diana told Catherine about Sarah. Catherine said,
Don't talk to her again.
Diana noticed classmates didn't like her. By class 4, Diana discovered her mother and aunt were witches who harmed villagers. She grew distant from them and often visited Lily's house, where Mrs. Elizabeth welcomed her warmly. One day, Diana went to Mr. Roberts' store.
Can I have a notebook? Please?
Mr. Roberts said coldly.
I don't have any.
Diana saw notebooks on the shelf, but stayed quiet. She left sadly and bought from another store. One morning, Diana sat in class. Lily wasn't there yet. Julie, Lily's neighbor, came with other girls.
Your mom and aunt stole jewels from Lily's house last night,
Julie said. The classmates stared at Diana with hate. She was shocked. She ran home after school.
Mom! You even stole from my friend's house!
She yelled. Catherine and Laura didn't care. Diana went to her room. That evening, Diana went to Lily's house. Mrs. Elizabeth and Lily greeted her kindly, though their eyes were red.
Aunt, I'm really sorry,
Diana said, tearing up. Mrs. Elizabeth hugged her. You don't need to apologize, dear. Mrs. Elizabeth made cake and tea to cheer her up. Catherine wanted Diana to learn magic, but she refused. Diana told Lily about it. Lily suggested,
Maybe it could help the villagers.
Diana agreed and began learning. One night, Catherine spoke to Laura.
I want to turn the mountain into a volcano.
Laura smiled.
You can do it, sister.
Diana cried.
No! Mom!
But Catherine went to her room to start the spell. The next morning, Catherine and Laura hurried outside, Diana following behind them. When she saw the volcano, her heart dropped. The villagers gathered.
It's going to erupt any moment.
Catherine grabbed Diana's hand, but Diana pulled away.
No. Mom. This is your punishment.
The villagers' eyes filled with tears. Laura pulled Catherine away.
We must run now.
They both ran away. Lily shouted,
Diana! You can fix this!
Diana began chanting. After an hour, the volcano turned back into a mountain. The villagers cheered. Mrs. Robert hugged Diana tightly, and Mr. Robert gently patted her head.
You saved us.
He said. Diana said sadly,
Aunt Elizabeth. I'm alone now.
Mrs. Elizabeth hugged her. You will stay with us, dear. Sarah and Lily wrapped their arms around her, and Diana smiled. Moral: kindness and courage can change the world for the better.